Buy my novel, Escape from the Village, from major booksellers online. Go to escapevillage.com. Subscribe to my Substack. Go to fountainheadforum.substack.com. Thank you. Welcome to the Party Pal. This is Fountainhead Forum 97. I'm talking with Avens O'Brien. She's going to talk about her libertarian journey, and above all, she's going to talk about one of her favorite things, which is Burning Man. How are you, Avens?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, and thank you for having me on to talk about Burning Man.
Yes, and I do want to ask though, you were basically born into libertarianism and objectivism. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So, it's weird because, like, for me, it was just kind of like normal, and then people were like, wait, what? What did you have happen? But my parents were actually both very into kind of libertarian thought, like in the kind of in the 60s and early 70s. So I believe my mother was kind of part of the like an objectivist crowd, and I think my father was too. It's funny because like I get everybody's stories and they're all just kind of background noise at this point. But in the early 70s, my dad basically volunteered for the 1972 Hosper's Tony Nathan campaign, and so my dad was like a young college student, like 19, 20 years old, and he he was volunteering with I believe the Libertarian Party of Massachusetts, and he was basically like one of those early like first people showing up in someone's living room being like, we're starting a party, what? And so my dad volunteered on the Hosper's Nathan campaign. So Tony Nathan came to New England, and my dad was at Boston College at the time, and he gave her rides around to like the colleges to talk to the students. And then my mother had been part of like a group of objectivists, and my mother always says that like basically the news came out that like the Libertarian Party was forming, and that so LP New Hampshire was forming, and like she's like, yeah, so a bunch of us got purged from the objectivist movement because we decided to like put together this LP chapter in New Hampshire. And so I think my mother may have been like the first secretary of the LPNH. And so through the 70s, basically my parents met doing activism in New Hampshire in the early mid 70s. My mother convinced her father to run for Congress as a libertarian in 1974. And then my parents, like, they met, they got married. They had my brother, they named him Ragnar because they're deeply influenced by Ayn Rand. And that was in 1975. And then it's interesting because at the time, there's just this kind of like, they used to host these kind of salons of people that were kind of, up and comers at the time. So they would like get a group of people to go to see Nathaniel Branden speak or Ayn Rand speak, or they would have people come to speak at like New Hampshire colleges or Boston colleges. And so they hosted Murray Rothbard at their house. They had Erwin Schiff. They had Roger Lee McBride. Huh?
Erwin Schiff, you said?
Erwin Schiff. Yeah, Erwin Schiff. I remember my mother tells the story. She's like, yeah, we had Erwin Schiff at our house, and Dad was like, let's never pay taxes again. And she's like, I really I love that, but also like I don't want to get arrested. Like it's just like Mom had all these things where like my parents would kind of go, I feel like they tempered each other pretty well for some time, but they had all these people kind of traipse through their living room, and they kind of hosted these kind of intellectual salons about libertarian philosophy and stuff like that. And then they homeschooled my brothers and I, and my parents ran for office a number of times through, I think my mother ran for governor of New Hampshire, I think in 1986. It was one of the years in the 80s. Mom always talks about it because it was like a last minute replacement. Like they were going to have this other person run, and then she ended up running for governor. So anyway, but like that's kind of like the environment I grew up in. And so I remember like as a kid, I didn't really recognize that like we were part of kind of a minority political movement. It was just kind of, yeah, this is what we believe, this is what my parents have told me about, etc. And I think that the first time that I really identified that we were a minority political movement was 1996. I was 9 years old, and it was the Clinton Gore Ross Perot and Harry Brown. Like those were the 4 people I think in 96. And what was it Perot? No, wait, Perot was the year. Anyway, not the important part. Yes, I was like, wait a minute. I'm like trying to make sure I remember this accurately. But what I remember is
96.
96. Yeah. It was, Clinton, Dole. Yeah, sorry. Like it's been a little while since I've thought about this, but I remember in 1996, like I like hanging out like in my neighborhood, and like, you know how kids are, they just kind of repeat what their parents have said. And so like my friends are like, my family's voting for Bill Clinton, and like somebody else is like, my family's voting for like Bob Dole. And I was like, yeah, we're voting for, like, I remember going to mom and being like, which one are we voting for? And she's like, we're voting for Harry Brown. And I was like, oh, okay. And so then I like went back to, my neighborhood and was like, we're supporting Harry Brown, and people and the kids were just like, who's that? And I was like, he's gonna be president. and then like the vote totals came out in the newspaper, and I saw like Harry Brown's numbers versus Clinton's and Dole's, and I was like, oh, we're not popular.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So when did you first
so that was the realization that we weren't cool.
So when did you first find your way to Burning Man?
So I think I had started hearing about Burning Man in the like early 2000s. And I really wanted to go, but I was on the East Coast, and it's like there's plenty of people who do it from all over the country, and all over the world. But it seemed like a logistical nightmare to try to do it from the East Coast. And so I think it was 2007 or 2008. I almost went. I had like a situation where like a boyfriend was going to go, and we talked about going together, and then it just didn't happen. And I'm so glad it didn't happen then, because I think that we would have like driven each other crazy on the trip. Like I'm like that relationship ended, and it was like a lovely thing, but I'm glad we did not do Burning Man together. So I actually didn't end up going. Like I moved to LA in 2010, and I made friends with a group of people that go to Burning Man. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go with you guys. And they were like, yeah, you're welcome. We'd love to have you. And so there was like 2 years that I like tried to go and just couldn't financially make it work. And so in 2012 was my first year. And so the thing is that prior to going to Burning Man, I'd gone to a lot of like other kind of festivals, not like Coachella or something, but just like different, like I'd gone to different music festivals, which Burning Man is not a music festival, but I'd also gone to like, the other thing besides growing up libertarian is I also grew up pagan. And so there were like all these like pagan kind of rainbow gathering-esque sort of festivals that have a lot in common with Burning Man. And so I grew up going to a lot of those. So I had a certain amount of comfort with some of the like kind of throwing off, regular society sort of like ethos of a lot of those festivals. And then I was also going to like regional local events that were put on by burners. And so I had this kind of like, I started with like a really good foundation before actually going to the burn the first time in 2012. Sorry, that was a very long answer.
There are a lot of regional burns, as they call them, which usually attract a smaller crowd, but they're also a little smaller. And I think they can handle them better logistically. And usually they're not, there are more people who maybe come from, no more than 200 miles away. But yeah, that's, in fact, a lot of burners now say that they like the regional burns better because they think that Burning Man has maybe lost what they called the spirit of Burning Man when it got started.
It's definitely like evolved or morphed or whatever. Since the very beginning, it was like 1986, and it was like Baker Beach, and they just built a man and burned it on the beach in the Bay Area. It's I believe, if I remember correctly, Black Rock City, so Burning Man is held in the Black Rock Desert, which is, for people watching and don't know, it's about 120 miles east and north of Reno. And it moved there, I want to say 30 so years ago. And And since then, like, I mean, a lot of people have said like, oh, it changed, it changed then. I know that I had in my Burning Man camp, and like among some of my closest Burning Man friends, a lot of my friends have been going for 29, 30 years or so. And so I remember a friend of mine telling me that one of the years in the mid 90s, somewhere, it's like, I think it was like 95 or 96. He said that like he had gone, and back in the day you used to bring guns and fireworks, and they would set up these like my friend was describing that they used to like set up like drive-by shooting ranges where they would set up targets and people would bring guns, and they would do all these fun like activities that involve like literally like a drive-by shooting range and things like that. And that year, what happened is there was like a couple of big like problems that happened, and one of them was that there wasn't like set areas that were for camping versus like driving, and there were no rules about like drinking and driving and things like that. Just people just did whatever the fuck they wanted because they were in the middle of the desert and nobody was around. And what happened is, if I remember correctly, somebody ran over a tent of sleeping people and killed them. It was horrible. It was a terrible, like, I think 4 people died or something like that. And it caused Burning Man to realize that like they needed to create some semblance of like, this is where people camp, this is where people can drive. We need to make regulations so that people don't, drive off into the camping area, whatever. And so Burning Man started creating sets of rules, and Burning Man really tries to minimize the rules about like what you can do at Burning Man. You can do anything at Burning Man, but like they have restrictions on like not having lasers, because somebody actually once got like there was like a very, very strong laser being pointed into the like crowd, and it blinded someone. And so they're like basically every rule at Burning Man that's come up has been because of a specific incident that like hurt someone terribly, and Burning Man is like, okay, let's not have that happen again. So I feel like they're fairly valid. But I would say that, I've been going since 2012. And so this was my 9th burn, because I skipped 2022, and obviously 2020 and 2021 didn't officially happen. But, in the 9 burns that I've been, I would say that like, there's always more complaints about it having changed than it actually having changed. I feel like a lot of it's kind of the language around, people who no longer go, and they go like, oh yeah, it's totally changed. And like, I still find so much of what I found in 2012. I'm still finding that out on the playa, and I'm finding new things. And I know people who've been going for 30 years, 25 years, and a couple of my campmates have been going for 20 years. And they're like, no, there's like, it's not quite the same, but it's not inherently different. It's like a person changes, right? Like a person evolves and grows. It doesn't make them not the same person. And I kind of feel that way about Burning Man, except Burning Man is made up of 70,000 plus people.
Well, what sometimes happens too is that where you get a culture around it, and then that culture gets set in its ways, and the culture ends up getting old. And then you're not attracting the new blood. So eventually, I don't know if that's going to happen. Because Burning Man's what, about 10,000 go there, or how many go there now?
So Burning Man is about 75,000 people. Like that's how many people were there this year. And so what's interesting is they do so at Burning Man every year there's a census, and so you can either, if you bought a ticket online, which most people did, but sometimes they get them secondhand. If you buy a ticket online, you'll actually get an email usually asking for your census data if you went. And if you go in person at Burning Man, you can like you can bike up to the little like thing, and you can fill out this thing, and they ask you, like, it's a completely voluntary thing, but they ask you like, how many burns have you been to? Where are you from? Your gender, your income. They actually want to know like, who's making up Burning Man this year? Like what are the numbers like? And I remember I was looking at this very recently, but in, I think 2016, 40% of people were virgin burners. So it was their first Burning Man, 40% of them in 2016. Yeah. And then in 2019, it was 28%. And so it just really varies. Like some years are a lot of, we call them virgins, is like first timers. Some years are a lot of like, the people who've been there at least once. And you can kind of see like, you'll see people who've been there like between 2 and 5 times is a very like, big window of people. And then there's like very, like if you look at like the little like line graph, the number of people who've been like, 25 or 30 times gets like really, really small. But it's still there's still a significant number of them. I mean, there's like 2 or 3 people in my camp that have been going since like 2001, and so it's kind of it's interesting because the demographics kind of shift. We have older people, we have younger people. The average age of burners, like based on the last couple of years, has always been mid-30s. There's definitely older people. There's definitely younger people. Part of Burning Man culture, which I think is really great, is that most Burning Man, like most of the time, if you decide you want to go to Burning Man, you get involved in your local community, and you often find yourself involved in a camp. And theme camps have establishment at Burning Man. Hey, this group of people has been doing this kind of thing at Burning Man for a set number of years. They have communication with Burning Man org about the kind of entertainment or things they're providing to Burning Man, to like the community of Burning Man. And then what happens is like that camp goes, hey, okay, so we're trying to like raise money for the pyrotechnics and DJ setup that we're going to have at Burning Man. So, we're having kind of an open opportunity for people to join our camp and volunteer to help and also pay some camp dues. And we will help you integrate into Burning Man. And so that's what happened with me is I didn't just like freely camp. I didn't like show up and like camp in a random spot. I got involved with a camp that was like it's placed every year and has a specific like thing that we're providing to the playa, and by doing that like we get a certain placement, and I got like a lot of like support. So I didn't have to bring a kitchen setup because my camp had one, and like I didn't have to bring a shower because my camp had one. And so that's the kind of thing that happens at Burning Man, is that this kind of community that brings in the virgins and sort of teaches them like how to interface with the community.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like an event that people really go to alone. I mean, I knew one person who went, and she was part of a camp where they just did bicycle repair.
Yep.
They were fixing people's bicycles, and they're probably, I don't know, you get a lot of bicycles or get a lot of cars there. I have to admit, one thing that has been a kind of a veto for me is I don't know if I could ever stand being in this really dusty environment. I've heard it's like that. If you're a person who's really allergic, is that an issue? Or, if you have problems dealing with the dust, because that's what I've heard about the playas. It gets to be that way.
Yes. So one of the big factors is that so weather can vary, and we're going to talk about that because this year was a very rainy year, and that never happens, but or very rarely happens. But the thing about Burning Man is that it's taking place in a dry lake bed. It is, except this year when it was wet, but it takes place in a dry lake bed, and it's funny because people who haven't been will be like, oh, it's sandy, and it's like no, it's dusty. You show up, and so when you get off of the asphalt, because you're on this like really small highway, so basically there's like a 2-lane highway. Like you leave Reno, you go up the 80, then you go on the 447, which is like this little 2-lane highway, and you drive through these like tiny towns. Like Gerlach is like a population of about 100 people, and then you keep going, and then you basically turn off the asphalt onto a dirt road. And as soon as you hit the dirt road, there's signs that say 10 miles an hour. And the reason for that is because if you go faster than that, you kick up a lot more dust. And then all that dust ends up on the participants that are like 6 miles away. And so what happens is basically you slowly make your way like 10 miles an hour down like a 5-mile road. And what's funny is you get greeted. So like they start, you got like gate, and gate goes, hi, we're just going to check and make sure you're not sneaking people in your RV or whatever. Do you have water? Do you have all your supplies? And do you have your ticket? Let me see it right here. Okay, cool. Someone else is going to scan it up ahead. And so that's like the first opening is them being like, do we need to turn you around because you don't have supplies or you don't have your ticket, or you're sneaking people in. And then you go to the next part and there's greeters. And if you go up to a greeter, and it's cute because there's all these really random like community things. Like I bring food, I bring like fresh fruit for the greeters. So like I drive up and they go like, hi, welcome home. And it's so cute. And I go, hey, would you like some grapes or would you like some watermelon? And they're like, holy shit, I'm in the desert. It's dry. There's the dust, everything. And the thing is that if you haven't been before, they go like, is this your first time? And you say, why, yes, it is. And then they go, please turn off your vehicle and step out. And they give you a hug. And then they ask you to make a dust angel to embrace the dust. They're like, it's going to be like this from now on. Get with the program. Like, let's do a dust angel together. So they get down on the ground and they do a dust angel and they ask you to do a dust angel too. They have you ring a bell to announce that you are a virgin who is no longer a virgin. And they give you like a little pamphlet about like everything about Burning Man. And then they go like, get back in your car and, you know, here, like, do you know where you're camping? Here's how you navigate. And from that point forward, you fucking have dust. Like dust is just gonna be in everything. I wear contact lenses and it is hell. It is so bad. You have to wear goggles and a face mask a lot of Burning Man. And it's just what you have to do in order to breathe because the dust just gets into everything. The dust gets into your tent. The dust gets into like all your stuff. If there's a dust storm and you're like out in the middle of it, it will cover your hair so you look like you've gone, you know, gray. Like it's the dust gets in your nose, even when you're like, you know, always masking when the dust kicks up. You get to a point like a few days in where you start using like saline solution, like those nostril, like, you know, the allergy, whatever stuff. And you're just like spraying the saline solution up your nose and blowing your nose a bunch. And everyone's like, yep, I understand. And like everyone like kindly averts their eyes while you're going like, oh God, I'm sorry. You know, we joke, we call it playa-lung because like it's bad. I'm not going to pretend that it's not like the worst thing about Burning Man. The only nice thing about playa dust is that because it's hot, right? Like, because it's usually like in like the high 90s at Burning Man, not always, but usually. The nice thing is that some people don't have access to showers and the dust like kind of gets all up on them and it makes them smell less. It's like the dust kind of like dries them out. And so people don't like, ironically, like you've got 70,000 people and half of them don't have access to a shower of any kind. And like, it doesn't even smell that bad because like this dust kind of like makes them not smell as bad.
That's very, very interesting. So, you know, so yeah, so of course they had an unusual situation where they had quite a bit of rain this year, and so what exactly you were there, but you left before the rains came.
Yeah, I lucked out. So like context, by the way, is that the Burning Man starts on Sunday at midnight, and then it goes the whole week, and then it ends. The last day of Burning Man is supposed to be Labor Day. And so they burn the man on the Saturday, they burn the temple on the Sunday, and then everyone leaves on Monday. But some people stay longer, some people leave earlier. And I have a tendency now to just go from Monday to Friday. That's usually my thing now. I actually skip the man burning and the temple burning most years because I've done it several times. And I'm just like, the weekend ends up being kind of partiers. So, and don't get me wrong, Burning Man is a giant party, but it's not just that. But the thing is, this year, we had a ton of rain before Burning Man. There was that hurricane that allegedly happened. There's a ton of rain before Burning Man started. And so people who were building the city actually kind of like had to deal with this rain for several days. I know some friends of mine were building they were building their camp, and they actually there was like 3 days of rain and they had nothing to do. So they basically just like, they had their they had their vans and their trucks like all lined up so that they could just kind of hop from one to the other, so they didn't get all wet. And they didn't have anything to do, so they just did nitrous for like 3 days. Like they had a giant nitrous tank. And so like it's like, hey, you know, people do what they got to do out there in the desert. But then the playa dried up by the time I got there, and most people got there like some people got there a little early, because you can get like a work access pass to get in early. But when you get in early, like the weekend before Burning Man was starting, and then like the Friday and Saturday, and then the week was beautiful because it had rained, so there was less dust than usual, and like the kind of the dust was kind of packed down hard. It was actually really, really nice, and the weather was like low 90s during the day and like 50s at night, and it was just beautiful like the whole time I was there. And then on Thursday, I was planning on leaving Thursday night anyway, but on Thursday, it was like very hot and really windy. And I was starting to pack up all my stuff, and I was like, I have a bad feeling about the weather. Like, I think it's going to be bad. And someone was like, hey, I just like heard a news report and it's supposed to rain tonight. And I was like, okay, I need to get the fuck out of here or else I won't be able to leave. And so I packed up everything, hugged everyone goodbye, and left just around sunset on Thursday night. And it started raining at like in the middle of the night on Friday, on Thursday night.
Yeah, you know one thing also. I knew a guy who was doing some work in Reno one time, and and there was a sign at one of the rental car agencies that said, "If you take your car to Burning Man, you will be charged a $500 rental fee."
Yep.
Have you heard stories like that, or?
Because the dust permeates like everything in the rental car as well. So
Oh, yeah.
like when I rented a car for my burn, and because I have a Tesla Model Y, and you can't take that out into the desert because one, I don't want to destroy my car, but two, because of the like charging and everything, I did not want to risk like getting stuck out there in the desert. But so I rented a Chevy Traverse, I think, and when I got my car home, I detailed it myself. Like you can either pay to get it detailed or what, but like the first thing I did is I drove through one of those like drive-through car washes to just do the first initial. And then I went around because the thing to get the playa dust off is white vinegar. So I basically went through and I sprayed the entire car on the outside with white vinegar, and then I drove it through the car wash again. And then I went through like row by row of the car, like starting with the trunk. I used like those car cleaning wipes, and then I sprayed everything with white vinegar, and I like literally just detailed the entire car. So by the time I got it to the rental agency, like they didn't know it had been at Burning Man, but most people don't do that thorough a job. And so if you don't do a thorough job, you will get charged because they have to pay for professional detailing at that point.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, that was just one thing. Yeah, but although I've also known people who, one guy who actually will go to Sacramento and drive from there. Apparently, they don't think about Sacramento, but
now they do.
Okay, yeah, because people are finding ways to work around it, but sometimes dust gets in.
Sacramento, Bay Area, and LA, there are a lot of rental agency companies at this point just go like, just tell us you're going to Burning Man so we can prepare for the fee. Like you're gonna prepare for that fee.
Yeah. So anyway, so you had the rain, and then so the rain ended up creating these where everything got really muddy. Then is what happened. And it sounds like to me it was already a little bit saturated to begin with. So, and maybe even some flooding.
So it was interesting because basically, because it's a flat lake bed, when it rains, it gets very it does kind of build up pretty quickly. It's when playa dust gets wet, it turns into this mud, and this mud cakes into everything. So it starts collecting, like if you're wearing shoes or you've got tires for your car or your bicycle. And the reason, by the way, that everyone has bicycles at Burning Man is because Burning Man is like 5 miles wide. And so So it's basically like 5 miles by 5 miles by 5. Like it's a pretty crazy environment anyway. So that's why people
Yeah.
are biking around. They can actually get places fast.
Yeah, 5
But
miles. Yeah, you can, yeah, 5 miles is not too bad. Yeah, if you're on a bike and you can save on the gas. Yeah.
exactly. And the thing is, you're not allowed to drive your car around unless you have a special pass. Like there are things called art cars that basically, like the idea is that they are like an art piece and they actually drive around, but they're limited to 5 miles an hour. They There's all sorts of like little like details about like driving around at Burning Man. So everyone bicycles around at Burning Man, and there are places where you cannot drive a car, even an art car. But what happens is the tires get caked on with the mud, and then the mud builds on the mud, and the mud builds on the mud, and so like you could see actually people did post pictures of their muddy boots and like how the mud was just building on the mud was building on the mud to the point where they look like they're on stilts. And it's very heavy, and if you don't have like 4-wheel drive and like a very specific vehicle that's built for this, you can fuck up your car. You'll get stuck for days. And so what happened, just for the record, is like it rained like Thursday night and Friday and into Saturday, and like it kept raining. And so the playa was never getting dry enough to drive on. And so they actually had to close Burning Man, not let anyone in who was coming from Reno for the weekend, because a lot of people do end up coming for the weekend because they couldn't get the week off. And so they weren't able to do that. So a lot of people just like ended up in Reno and just partying in Reno. But what happened is the playa was not drivable, except for like, that's the thing, is like emergency vehicles would have 4-wheel drive, like have very specific things so they could get through if there was actually an emergency. But for the most part, like most people's cars or RVs aren't really built for that. So people were just told to stay put. And there were people who attempted to drive off, and it was really dumb because like most people couldn't make it. So they would just get stuck on the road somewhere. And then they're away from their camp. They're away from their like covering structure. They're away from more food and water and resources. And so a lot of people, I understand if someone had like an emergency, like, or had to like catch an international flight that couldn't be rescheduled. But a lot of people were just like, oh, I don't want to be here anymore. It's raining. And by a lot, I mean like probably like 5 or 10%. It wasn't a huge, it wasn't like all of Burning Man. There were all these headlines that were like, Burning Man people trying to escape. And it's like, no, like 70,000 people are not trying to escape the desert. Most of these people expected to be here for the weekend, and most of them are making the most of it. And so a lot of people out there have Starlink. And so a lot of people were sharing their Starlink so that people could communicate with people at home and say, hey, I'm safe, I'm fine. Burning Man ended up bringing in cell phone towers to help people get signal so that they could text their loved ones and let them know that they're safe. And people just started creating like just continuing the community, but like, hey, let's make more of a dry structure for people. And so like, what's funny is most burners had a blast. People are coming back from Burning Man right now being like, this was the best burn ever because we had to like come together and like survive the elements, and it was fine. It was unpleasant, but that's what community is for, is to help you through unpleasant times.
Yeah, that's another thing though too though. The lack of connectivity there, because I've often asked somebody, I mean, let's say, hey, Avens, let's meet up at Burning Man. It's like, well, I go to Burning Man. How do I find you? Because usually if our cell phones aren't working, it's like, and how do I communicate? Because, nowadays, it's almost always people find each other. They just call on their cell phones and they keep talking on their cell phones until they see each other.
Yep. It's, so I don't have cell phone signal at Burning Man. I have T-Mobile, so they just don't have cell phone signal at Burning Man. Some people do. I don't know how, but I've noticed that like what ends up happening is, so Burning Man is structured like a clock, and so what it is basically everything's placed so that like the man is basically at the center of like a an old analog
the center of the clock,
the center of the clock, and then you have a first ring of and like half a mile out, you have like a first ring, we call it the Esplanade. And so there are camps that are along the Esplanade at 2 o'clock, 2:30, 3 o'clock, and it goes all the way across. So 6 o'clock is center camp. And And so basically, like, you've got this, the spokes of the clock, basically, and they're identified by their like, so temple is at 12 o'clock, and then basically camps start at 2 o'clock and 10 o'clock. And then what happens is, so you can navigate by saying, okay, I'm at 2:30, or I'm at 2:45, or I'm at 3 o'clock, or 7 o'clock, or whatever. And then the streets outward. So basically you have the Esplanade, which is the center, and then it has like A Street, B Street, C Street, D Street, E Street, F Street, all the way down to like J or K or something like that. And so what happens is, and each of these blocks is like 100 feet by like 200 feet or something like that. And so what they do is like my camp is Honey Puddle, and we have certain themes and things we provide. But Honey Puddle was placed at 3:30 and B. And so my friends, before I go to Burning Man, I let people know Honey Puddle will be camped at 3:30 and B. Here's here's my location. Here's how to find me. Like, we have a giant honeycomb thing in the front. My tent is green. And then what happens is, like, and I'll be here on the playa these days, and then I have a whiteboard outside my tent. And so people wander into my camp and they go, hi, I'm looking for Avens. And people will be like, oh, check her whiteboard. And I'll be like, I'm out, like, checking out the man. I'll be back at sunset. And so my friend will be like, hey, came by, maybe I'll see you later. And like, we'll leave each other like non-synchronous notes about like where we are, what we're doing. And, hey, I stopped by. This year, I only ran into like 2 people that I wasn't camped with that I knew. Like, I had a whole list, like Nick Gillespie from Reason was there, like a whole bunch of other people were there that I was really looking forward to seeing. And I had their coordinates, and it, like, in a little map that I kept in my bag. And I biked over to their camp, but they weren't home. So like, that happens. And then like I biked over to someone else and they weren't available. They weren't around. And I was like, cool, like leaving them notes. And then I just went back to my camp, or I went off and did other things. One of the principles of Burning Man is immediacy. And part of it is to, like, to be present where you are. And so, yes, of course, you want to try to coordinate with your friends. Hey, I'm going to be Burning Man too. And if you can, it's great to coordinate. But if you don't, you just kind of like, you know what, I'm going to be right here right now. And so, like, I went to my friend's camp to find him, and I couldn't find him. But his camp was having a dance party and they were serving drinks. So I hung out and I like went to this party and had some drinks, and I just decided to make the most of that experience. I was right there. I'm going to have a fun time. And it wasn't the experience I showed up for in that moment. I wanted to catch up with my friend. Didn't matter. Like, be here now and be part of that immediacy. And so that's one of the big things about Burning Man is, like, you can make plans, but don't rely on them. And you're going to have a beautiful experience if you, like, let the playa bring you where you didn't expect to go.
Yeah. Just wondering, does the 12 o'clock, is that go north, or how does it apply? And 6 o'clock is south, or is it reflect the directions at all?
It doesn't reflect directions. I think, I don't know this for sure, but I think that the clock axis moves every year to kind of reduce our impact on the environment. So I believe that, like, where 12 o'clock is actually is slightly different. Some years, I might be wrong about that, but I had a conversation with somebody about this, like, recently, and I feel like that was brought up. But what I know is, like, like, when you get there, you end up being able to be like, oh, this is east over here. But I don't think 12 o'clock actually corresponds with north. I know, I'm trying to think, like, because I was at 3 o'clock in B, and I know like that where east was coming from, because I know where the sun was coming up from where I was. And I feel like I'm totally doing this. Never eat shredded wheat. I think that the temple might have been directionally south, but I don't remember. I'd have to look at it. But yeah, so I don't think it's like just like 12 o'clock is north. I think it's just based on, like, you drive in, and then, like, it's going to be based directionally on like the point in which you drive in, because you're basically driving in at 6 o'clock, and I think you're driving south. So it may actually be that 12 o'clock is facing south, but I don't remember.
Okay, yeah, that's not that big deal, I guess. So, so you just have this thing where you meet. Uh, so getting back, else, what were there any problems with anybody who did have? I mean, were there any cases where people couldn't get out? Or I also heard too that apparently they had some people were walking out and they were taking them out on buses too. Although I
Yeah.
don't.
So yeah, it's been interesting because there was a news report that Chris Rock like walked out of Burning Man and Diplo walked out of Burning Man. So one of the big things is that Burning Man has there's a series of principles about Burning Man, and one of those principles is leave no trace, and so the whole idea is it's a pack in pack out event. You never like make trash and leave it. Like the idea is you come in, you bring all your stuff, you bring all the water you need, you bring all of the food you need, you bring all of the things you need, and you maybe do it with a camp so you have like a large group of people doing it. But then when you're leaving, you have to pack everything up, and you have to actually, your camp has to clean the entire area to make sure that you've left no trace of anything that's not supposed to be there. We refer to it as MOOP, which is matter out of place. And the whole idea is after you've cleaned up your camp, you use like a rake, a metal detector, anything, and you like rake through your area to make sure that there's no like matter out of place that is like affecting the environment. So the interesting thing is that because of the rain, a number of people did escape, right? A number of people decided to leave, and they couldn't drive their cars. So some people walked the 6 miles to the asphalt where they got picked up. Burning Man had to start having some buses going to pick people up. People were like arranging for cars to pick them up. It is a very remote area, so like it was probably quite the thing to try to like get people set up. But the thing that's interesting is that people who left on foot obviously didn't bring their stuff with them, right? They brought like the bare minimum and then they walked out. And so now it's actually interesting because like there's now a conversation about like are those people coming back for their stuff, or did they arrange for their campmates to bring their stuff home? I don't expect that Chris Rock brought his own stuff. I have a feeling that Chris Rock showed up with a bag, and somebody else set up an RV for him, and somebody else set up all of his, things. That happens. We refer to it as plug and play, and it's like people do that. So like I have a feeling that Chris Rock probably showed up with exactly as much stuff as he had, because like he brought with him, because everyone else probably he had someone bring it for him. So in that case, like I can imagine that probably just cleans itself up, right? Because somebody else does it. For a lot of people who left, there's now a conversation about like who's going to be able to come back to get their stuff, and like and how you kind of enforce that, or how you kind of like, hey, okay, you were here before and you're just coming to clean up your stuff. That's great. It's a really it's a lot of new things that Burning Man hasn't really dealt with before, and I'm sure they will. I think it'll be fine. They'll just they'll have people come and get their stuff, and then there's also a team of people. There's like volunteers and paid employees who do what we call like restoring the playa and cleaning up everything afterwards, and actually also doing we call it a MOOP map, where they also clean areas where camps were, and they make sure there wasn't anything left, and if there was, a camp can actually get like a red mark on the MOOP map, which means they left MOOP, they left trash, they left some problem, and it had to get cleaned up for them, and it's a strike against you. So like next year, if your camp has like a big red spot from leaving trash, or let's say a trailer or a tent or something because your campmates left, if that happens, Burning Man might decide that you shouldn't get placed again, and they won't put your camp back in where it was. Like you'll apply for placement, and Burning Man will be like, sorry, you totally disrespected the playa and our rule and our our community, and so you will not be allowed back. Your camp will not be allowed back. If you get a ticket yourself, you do what you do, but your camp will not be allowed back until you've like figured out how to be part of the community again.
Yeah, that's definitely, I know, one of the principles.
I'm sorry, I'm giving the longest answer to every question you have.
Yeah, the whole leave no trace thing. That's definitely one of the key principles. Yeah. Well, also, but some of these celebrities too, like Chris Rock, I also hear, it's supposed to be a gift economy, but they're hiring people to go to Burning Man, which seems to go against the spirit of Burning Man as well. I know one person who actually got hired as a chef there and then found out what it was all about. And then she actually went back the next year and on her own and said, I'm going to make food for people and I'm going to give it away.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, it's funny because there are a number of people that complain because, like, yes, there are people who show up at Burning Man who are what we refer to as plugging and playing, where they do things like paying someone to drive their RV in, and then they just, they fly in or something. There are people that, pay chefs and things like that. And as much as it's kind of contrary to the spirit of Burning Man, because Burning Man is supposed to be a decommodification event, which I don't agree with in principle off Playa, but I actually like how it manifests itself on Playa. But the thing is that, like, a lot of my friends actually have situations where, like, they were hired to be a chef. And so they were given a ticket, they were provided with, basically, this opportunity. And a lot of people, like, wouldn't have been able to afford to do it otherwise. And usually, not always, but usually, even a camp that's like paying somebody to, like, to let's say, be a chef or something, a lot of times they'll give them like a day, like, no, go experience Burning Man, like, have this experience, you're here, like, do this thing. And so that'll happen. Like, you'll get someone who was paid 1 year to be a chef, and then they see what it's all about, and the next year they're like, no, I'm gonna come and do this my own way. But maybe that wouldn't have happened if they hadn't had that opportunity that was commodified. And so it's weird because, like, I've definitely been in situations like myself where I've seen that kind of thing where, like, it's like someone's kind of paying to make it easier. But, like, I have a friend who, they have a small child and they want to go to Burning Man. They want to bring their kid to Burning Man. But it's really, like, there's a lot of, factors at play. So they hire a nanny and they pay for that nanny to go to Burning Man. They accommodate them in every way. And then, like, the rule is, like, you're going to have a couple nights off, like, to go enjoy Burning Man, but you're also going to watch my kids so I can go do acid in the desert. And, like, that's, like, I love that. I love that idea, as long as I just want that arrangement to be made off Playa. Like, I know it's silly, but it's this kind of, like, I don't have an issue with that because it helps accommodate a lot of things that couldn't otherwise get accommodated, and a lot of people who might not have the opportunity to go except for that. And I think I love the idea of people going. I love the idea of people, seeing what it's all about and embracing this experience. And so if this is one way to do it, then, like, be careful to, like, not totally commodify the experience, but also like give people an opportunity that didn't exist before. That's why I love capitalism.
Yeah, and I think I've learned from experience that I don't think gift economies can ever work, even in the context of capitalism. But I don't necessarily want to go into the details of that. But
well, what I love about the gifting economy, about Burning Man. So people, like, when I first heard about Burning Man, I thought it was a barter economy. It's not. It's a gifting economy. But the entire idea is, like, you come to Burning Man with everything you need, because one of the other principles is radical self-reliance. And the whole idea is that you show up with everything you need, and then you show up with extra. And you're in this kind of survivalist environment, but you're also embracing decadence. So, like, my camp is, yes, we have shade structures to protect us from the sun, but also we fill that shade structure with pillows and cushions, and we're not just bringing water to drink, but we're bringing alcohol to, like, have a good drunk time. Like, there's this thing where you're, like, both surviving and providing decadence. And what happens is you not only bring enough for yourself, but you go, hey, this is a thing I want to provide to the playa. I'm going to do mixed drinks, or I'm going to do coffee, or I'm going to do, there's a camp that does midnight poutine. There's all these different things, like, that happen. And so this whole, like, decommodification idea, and this whole gifting idea is this idea, like, that you provide, like, something for others, and you're not obligated to provide. It's not like you have to be like, here's my tent, have it. Like, it's not communism, but it's this idea that, like, people have shown up, and it doesn't cost anything more to you don't show up at the bar and have to pay money to get a drink. You just like, you show up at the bar and you go like, oh, hi. And someone goes like, hey, we have more alcohol. Would you like a drink? Or I go, hey, I'm out of alcohol, but I have something, like I have water. Would you like some ice water? Like, I'm not obligated to like, give someone alcohol if I think they're too drunk or anything like that. But like the idea is I provide gifts and everyone provides gifts. And if everyone provides gifts, then we all get to share in that abundance. And it doesn't work on a practical scale out in the world, but coming into this space and being like, and for like a week being in this place of abundance and gifting and sharing is kind of awesome. Like it kind of makes the world where I'm making a bunch of money and paying mortgage and paying whatever, like it makes it kind of more fun because I'm like, oh, I'm also going to save up money so that I can do this thing for other people. And so it's almost like an act of philanthropy, but it's not quite. It's a little different.
Yeah. So some of those people left early. What happens if, let's say, if somebody has a medical emergency? What usually happens with that? And especially in a case like this, where if somebody might have had a medical emergency.
So in general at Burning Man, so Burning Man organization they pay a lot of different fees for a lot of different things. And they spend about $500,000 a year on medical services at Burning Man. And so they have medic tents, they have, there's helicopters for airlifting people out. And they're definitely medical emergencies. Like people have died at Burning Man. There have been suicides. There have been, heart attacks. There have been drug overdoses. There have been problems at Burning Man. There was a woman who was run over by a car at one point because, more recently, because she wasn't wearing any lights and she fell asleep in the middle of the dust in the dark, and so a car drove over her because they just didn't see her in the dark. And so these kinds of things happen in there, and it's awful. It's terrible. But frankly, for a city of 75,000 people to exist for 10 days without any deaths at all, or with like one or two, is actually pretty impressive compared to like actual populations usually. But yeah, they have medical evacuation. I feel like once or like at least once a year, somebody ends up getting airlifted out of Burning Man to Reno Hospital. I know that in this situation, I think one person died this year at Burning Man, and they found his body in the mud. And I don't know, because the news reports were like somebody died at Burning Man, and then reports from inside the playa were that that his generator and water coincided and he got electrocuted. I don't know if that's accurate. It could just be a rumor. And so these are things to be concerned about. And so Burning Man is very much a lot of us are always looking out for each other, trying to hey, make sure you're wearing lights so you don't get run over on the playa, or or be careful in this way, or don't operate pyrotechnic equipment while tripping on acid. These are things that we try to help each other out with so that we don't have medical emergencies. But there absolutely have been medical emergencies on the playa. Burning Man org does provide a lot of services. And then I think this year, that was one of the big reasons that they didn't want people escaping if they didn't have to, because when people did try to drive their cars out, if they got stuck in the mud, then it made it harder for emergency vehicles that were outfitted correctly to handle that mud. It made it harder for those emergency vehicles to get to people that needed it.
Yeah. When people go to Burning Man for the first time, what's something that they wish they had brought?
It's funny because nowadays there's all these lists online that give you a solid list. So the first year that I went, I didn't bring a cooler. I just relied on I was going to drink room temperature water. I did it. And one of my campmates was like, I am giving you cold water every day. And so it was really sweet because now one of the big things that I always bring is I bring one of those drink coolers, those 5-gallon coolers with the spigot at the bottom. And I put a block of ice in it and I put water. And so I always continuously have ice cold water because that was something that I didn't bring that year. But everybody usually knows to bring goggles and face masks. Like these are things that are kind of a gimme. This year, the thing that I forgot to bring was a vest. And I know this sounds funny, but it's hot, so I'm like wearing like a bikini and I'm biking around the playa. And one of the things that you do when you're wandering the playa is you usually carry a backpack, and in the backpack you have a water bottle, you might have a notebook, you have like saline solution for your nose, you have tissues, you have a little trash bag. If you're a woman on the playa on your period, you can't dispose of your tampons in the porta potties, so you have to carry a bag to throw them away. So I carry like little like dog poop bags to like throw away any kind of waste like that. You carry your own toilet paper. You usually carry like a face mask, goggles, and a headlamp. So and sunscreen, and like there's all sorts of things. Like so I end up with a whole backpack. And the straps of the backpack start to wear on my shoulders. So actually, I don't know if you can see it, but like I actually have this kind of worn like scarring that will go away. But like and I wish I'd worn a vest all like I want something that doesn't cover my arms, but I really wish I'd had a vest to put my backpack on. What I think the thing that I think that people don't expect at Burning Man isn't about the supplies. I think the thing that it's so hard to articulate because people think, oh, it's a rave in the desert, it's just a big party, it's a music festival. None of those things are accurate. Burning Man is an arts festival. It's a community of art, and the scale of the art is completely beyond like what you expect. And so the first year I went, I was like, all right, cool. Like hippie festival, people can be naked. Like, okay, none of that is like that impressive to me. The scale of it of 70,000 people was a lot, but I went biking into the desert my second day, my first year. And there was a Spanish galleon ship, like a ship. It looked like a shipwreck, as if a ship had been in the ocean and then got a cannonball into the middle of it and dropped onto the ocean floor. And so I'm like, what the fuck? And it is like a 3-story ship in the desert. And like I walked up to it and I was like, what the fuck? And it had basically the back of it was kind of broken, like it had been kind of it was in a way so that people could climb into it, but it was legitimately like multiple stories of height, and you like walked into the bottom of it, and then you went and it was angled in such a weird way. I don't even know how they did this. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen at Burning Man. It was the very first year I went. It was angled in such a way that when you climbed onto it, it was totally secure, but it felt like it was moving. You felt like you were on a fucking ship because the angle of it was not level. And so you were like walking along and you go through the different rooms of a ship and you get to the like end, and there was like the captain's ship and it like the captain's quarters, and they had all these books from the 1800s, and they had like an old tiny like photograph of a woman, and like it looked like the captain had just been there. Like it literally looked like a captain had just been at this in his quarters and had just gone up to the steering wheel. And so like I just kept like walking through it, and you go up the stairs and you go up another level, and there's like hundreds of people on this ship, and you're just like out in the desert, and it looks like you're exploring a shipwreck that has been there for 100 years. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen, and it was huge. And so there were like, at one point there were like 30 of us on it, and we weren't even like in each other's way. We could just explore it. It was fucking so cool. And so much of the art is like that. So much of the art is enormous, and you feel so tiny, and yet you feel so connected because you're there, you're looking at this giant sculpture that's like 78 feet high, and there's people around you, and you're all taking pictures. You're like, hey, can you get a picture with me with it? Like, and you have this community, and you're like, oh my God, look, it's got fire in it. Like, there's a button here. Let's press that button. There's all this interactive art. And so you find yourself like pressing buttons, and then like flames are shooting out of a Pegasus. It's like, that's 7 feet high. That's the thing that I didn't I knew Burning Man had that, but I did not expect it. It was so much bigger than I could have ever imagined.
Yeah. Do you think some people go there just is it, for some it's maybe just hedonism for the sake of hedonism, or what do you think is the obviously you find it very motivating though, and
Yeah. I think it's kind of a combo because I think like I have friends who only do drugs at Burning Man because like and it's partially because they're disconnected from the world and it's like this opportunity to be in a place where everyone is pretty cool with you being on drugs. I mean there are cops, there are things to worry about, but
yes,
the fact is like if you're at Burning Man and you wander into a space and you're talking to someone and you go and you're like, oh wow, like my acid just kicked in. Like people will be like, are you okay? Do you need any water? Like, are you good? Like, how's the experience? Like, everyone's just cool. Like, you can't go to like a nightclub and be like, yeah, my acid just kicked in. Like someone will be like, I'm sorry, you can't be on drugs here. Like,
yeah,
Burning Man is interesting because there are lots of people who do sober burns. There are lots of people who, do these enlightened yogic sort of like, I'm just here for an enlightenment journey, Burning Man. I usually do drugs one night on the playa. Like I used to the first year I went, I did a lot. I did a lot of drugs. It was really, really fun. It was a blast. But like I don't need to do that like every year. I don't need to do that every time. There are definitely people who show up and they're just like, I'm just gonna party. I'm gonna get fucked up. I feel like
yeah.
most people are fairly intentional about it. And there's a lot of support and help for those who aren't like or for people who have a problem. So there's a dome where you can go if you're having a bad trip and you can talk through that bad trip. So one of the things I love, and this is actually like this tickles the libertarian part of me quite a bit, is we have a thing called the Rangers. And so the Rangers are from Burning Man. So there's Rangers that are like from the Bureau of Land Management, and like those are law enforcement. And so you avoid those Rangers and you avoid law enforcement in general. But the Black Rock Rangers, the Burning Man like official Rangers, these are volunteers who have been coached through like how to deal with disputes on playa and to like you basically apply the least amount of force possible in any circumstance. And so what they end up doing is they provide kind of a buffer between the people and possible law enforcement. So for example, if someone stole something from my tent, I may or may not want to communicate with law enforcement, but I can talk to a ranger, and a ranger can kind of walk me through, hey, do you want to talk to a police officer about this? Or like if there was a sexual assault, like Rangers are there to kind of support the community and try to resolve like disputes without involving law enforcement. But like if I'm lost on the playa and I'm on a bunch of acid or shrooms or something like that, I could be like, I might see like the guy in khaki, and I like there's a kind of a look that the Rangers all have, and I could be like, hi, I don't know where I am and I need to get back to my camp. And that person might be like, are you okay? And it's not a cop. And I'll be like, I'm on a ton of shrooms. And they'll be like, okay, let's get someone to escort you back to your camp. Where's your camp? And do you need some water? And like most of Burning Man is filled with that anyway. Like if someone walked up to me and they're on drugs, I'm going to help them out as much as I can. But what I love is that Burning Man provides a lot of community support for people who have taken too many drugs or do go the hedonism route. And it's fine. It's okay. Like we've all kind of been there, even though some people haven't done drugs. But like it's an environment that's totally welcoming of that and handles that. And it's like it's a safe place to do those things. And that's what's really beautiful about it. And I don't think that too many people abuse it, which is lovely.
That's good to know. Does it really compare to any other festivals? You haven't done, although you said it doesn't compare to Pork Fest, and I don't know if you've been to the Rainbow Gathering, but or some of these other
So
events.
there's similarities to rainbow gatherings, and I used to attend as a child, like at pagan festivals, or kind of pagan festivals and rainbow gatherings kind of intertwine a little bit. But the pagan festivals that I used to go to were in upstate New York, and sometimes in Ohio. There's these kind of things that are put on by organizations like the Association for Consciousness Expansion, which used to have like Timothy Leary and stuff at them. And there's that like that little fun little space, by the way, where like Timothy Leary kind of intersects with the neo-pagan and consciousness expansion community and the libertarian community, which is kind of the little Venn diagram my parents like existed in as well. But the thing about a lot of those about those events is I think a lot of people try to compare Burning Man to music festivals. And I think that it's probably better compared to something like a Rainbow Gathering or I haven't done Jackalope. I've done Porkfest. Like there's like tiny similarities, especially because the former president of the Free State Project, Matt Phillips, I think he was the president. He's been deeply involved for a long time. He's a ranger at Burning Man, and so he's very involved with Burning Man, and that's like his primary community. And then he definitely tried to put some of that influence into Porkfest the years that he was deeply involved in Porkfest. And so I definitely think there's been kind of influences there, but and I remember a couple times I've been to Porkfest, I remember they like burned like a wooden thing, like a porcupine in effigy. So there's little things, but I know like a lot of these things don't have the level of scale and they don't have the emphasis on art. And I think that that's what people kind of don't expect from Burning Man, is that Burning Man is this community of people that are all kind of gathered together, and yes, they're going to party, and yes, there's going to be EDM music over here, and there's going to be, live music over here, and there's going to be this or that. But like, there's all this incredible art out there in the desert. And on top of that, people are making experiences for each other. And so, you've got midnight poutine at one camp, or there was a camp this year called Slow Your Roll. And when you biked up to it, there was a sloth in the window. Like it was like a sloth stuffed animal in the window, whatever. And when you walked up to it, they were like, "Welcome to Slow Your Roll. Would you like to slow your roll?" And when you got there, they you lined up, they seated you, and then you received a menu. And your menu had like your drinks, right? And you know how like you go to a normal bar, right? You're like drink, and then it'll be like $7 or drink $12 or whatever. And what they had was like drink and then a number, like a 7 or a 10 or 12 or 20. And like you're like, wait a minute, this is Burning Man. You don't pay for things. And they were like, select your drink, and this is how many minutes you have to wait before you can get your drink. And so we'll give you a timer, and then you're going to hang out, and you're going to slow your roll. You're going to hang out with people here, and in 7 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever, you will receive your drink. And like, that was such a cool concept, and that would drive some people crazy. Great. They get to go elsewhere, but this is the camp for that. And then my camp had honey tasting and mead tasting and like honey flavored drinks, and we like a whole bee theme. Each camp provides an experience that is unique to it, and so people can choose their own adventure. They can get they can get something new and interesting at every camp, and I think that's the thing that kind of thing, I feel like you can find a little bit of that at other festivals and other things, because like people will be like, this is the place to chill and listen to, like harp music, or this is the place over here where we do yoga at 8 a.m. And this is the place over here where there's going to be karaoke. Other festivals have kind of started to embrace sort of things like that, or have been doing that. But I think that, I think they're all just kind of a shadow of the gigantic scale of Burning Man, frankly.
Yeah, so do you have anything else to say before we go?
I don't know. What I want to say is that I think that anyone listening to your show already knows not to agree with the media on things. Like knows to be skeptical about what the media
I hope
says
so.
about things. I would hope so. But something that I find, even in my most libertarian and critical thinking environments, is that I often find that like when a news story comes out that like you're like, oh yeah, that sounds right, because let's say you don't like the people involved or something like that. Like a lot of people are like, see, look at this, and they'll just share it, haphazardly. Like, and I felt that a little bit in Burning Man. Like I felt like with the Burning Man situation, with the 70,000 people are trying to escape the desert. A lot of this was just like media sensationalism. It was bullshit. And I found that even in subcultures like libertarians subcultures, like people go like, oh yeah, that's a festival of like leftists and tech bros. Like there's all sorts of, people don't like burners because they feel that they're just, they're either like rich tech bros from the Bay Area, or they're a bunch of fucking dirty hippies, or, leftist environmentalists, or whatever. They have these opinions about what they are. And really Burning Man is an incredibly, like ideologically diverse thing, and I like that about it. But what I found is that, like, I can tell somebody doesn't like burners. They see an article saying that the burners are having a bad time. They share that article without like critically like thinking about, whether that's just new, sensationalism or whatever. And I think that, that has an applicability beyond that, which is that, like, when we see news that confirms our biases, regardless of whether that news is mainstream CNN or or some kind of alternative media source, I think it's really important to always think critically about that, and as often as possible try to get to the source of the information to find out what's actually going on. Because like that was the thing, is like they're talking about escaping people. They're talking about there were like the porta potties are overflowing with shit. And like everyone I knew at Burning Man was like, actually, like the porta potties were just changed, like a few hours ago. Like everything's fine. And it just, like, people really, there's a mix of people enjoying bad news happening to people they don't like, and people just kind of like just being dicks. And like, and I'm sitting here like at, safe and warm at home and talking to all my friends who are still at Burning Man, and I'm watching this like misinformation get out there, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to do my best to tell people what's honestly going on, but I want people to know that, like, the best way to find out what's actually going on is to ask those who are there and involved. I hope you get to interview Leandro, because he was actually there during the actual rain, and like his experience is going to be so much more. Like I think it was his first year too, so like he's going to have an incredible story for that. And I like share those stories and share direct testimonials about that kind of thing. And for anyone like watching who's just interested in something like Burning Man, Burning Man gives you more than you take in, but it, like, a lot of what Burning Man is what you choose to contribute to, or what you choose to bring to it. And so, like, don't just dismiss it all with like, oh, cool, the chick with the crazy red hair like wants to go to Burning Man and like do drugs in the desert. It is more than that, and I appreciate those who listen to hear what else it is.
Some libertarians were turned off by what appears to be a complete buying into the Corona narrative. Although I'm curious to know how that impacted the crowd.
Honestly, there was not, like, this year there was nothing about that whatsoever. Ironically, burners have to mask half the time anyway because of the dust. But like, I don't think I didn't hear a single word about coronavirus at the burn. Like, I heard that like last year was also like that. Like, but I mean, I skipped last year, so I can't speak.
Well, saying, oh, you have to be vaccinated to attend these festivals and stuff like that. These so-called rebels who are completely doing what who are rebelling. It was that way with Flipside, which is a regional burn around here.
So I can understand, like, regional burns too also have a regional burns are able to control their populations a bit more. And I mean, obviously I don't like mandates like that, obviously. But I do know that like Burning Man didn't have, like, I know that there was a conversation, but again, this is the thing, is like media sensationalism about something versus what actually happened is like the news articles were like Burning Man mulling a vaccination requirement. Who, like, that could have been somebody brought it up in a meeting, but Burning Man did not have a vaccination requirement, and they didn't have a testing requirement. And like, I think it's also important to recognize that, like, you know, someone in a boardroom might have been like, hey, here's a good idea. Let's just say that we were mulling that over so that the government, you know, doesn't give us too much shit about this thing. Like, who the fuck knows? And I don't like the speculation that, like, that, you know, it's just one of those things. In 30 seconds, it becomes Burning Man mandated vaccines, which is not true.
I'm not basing anything I'm saying here based on what I've said with the media, either from what I've heard from people who were there or sometimes what I saw on their actual websites. But anyway, that's sounds like it's blown over.
I appreciate, by the way, there was an article in the San Francisco Chronicle that said Burning Man co-founder thinks mandating vaccines goes against the festival's ethos. So here's the thing, is that in something, I like when people have a conversation about that, because if somebody brought up mandating vaccines and then someone else is like, no, and here's why, then there's a dialogue about that. And that's a good dialogue to have, especially among a crew that tends to be more leftist, because then they go, oh yeah, that makes sense. You know, yeah, like we believe in, you know, control over your body and it should be this way, right? And I think that can be valuable when those conversations are able to happen, where someone suggests something and someone is able to say no, and here's why, and then it makes the conversation better for those who might not be having that conversation at all.
If there were people who are interested in the conversation. Well, okay. Well, this has been a good talk. Where can we find you on the net? You take a lot of pictures too, so.
I do. I take a lot of photos at a lot of events. I have Burning Man photos coming out soon. But generally, so my name is Avens O'Brien, and you can find me like avens.me. So avens.me is actually just a link to like a website that kind of effectively like a link tree. It'll link to all my things. But I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I'm on, you know, all the things. I do some writing on Substack, so avens.substack.com, but you can find it all by going to avens.me, and there's links to everything. And I just, you know, I'm just here to make a bunch of noise on the internet and hopefully make people think a little bit differently about this.
Where does Avens come from?
It's a type of flower that my parents happened upon on the Appalachian Trail, actually. So it's a flower that apparently, like, I don't know like that much about it. I've never even grown it, but it's but if you look up Avens flowers, there's one thing that I've noted, people have told me, is that it grows at high elevations. And one day I was posting on Facebook and I just said something like, I wanted like pick me up. And I was like, tell me something good about me or about life or whatever. And my friend, who's like does something in wildlife, environmental, whatever, like he like works like in some kind of outdoorsy field, actually said to me, he was like, so I was hiking and I found an Avens in like on a high mountain trail at very high elevation. And he's like, and flowers don't usually grow at that high of an elevation. And he's like, so you come from really strong stock of, like, you know, he's like, it was a really cute compliment of like, you know, like your flower, your namesake, grows at really high elevations in conditions that flowers don't normally grow in. And so do you. And I was like, ah.
That's a great story. Yeah, named after a flower. I didn't know that. Okay, well, thank you very much.
I was almost a Dagny. My parents decided not to name me Dagny, but I was almost Dagny Kira.
I could never name a daughter Dagny. I don't care about the novel. I don't. Kira seems to be much more popular, but
Kira's a really great name.
Yeah, Kira is a great name. Well. Please like the video, thumbs up, subscribe, follow the channel, buy my novel Escape from the Village, check out my Substack. I'm Chris Baker. Thank you, Avens, and we're out.
Thank you, Chris.